Hi everyone, it's Nicole Kelleher from the Retail Success Series, and I am thrilled to share this interview with you today. I sat down with Alex Fulton, who is the founder of Little Duck Insights. So littleduckinsights.com.au is her website, and we spoke about market research. And I truly believe that a lot of small business owners don't consider market research because it's outside of our comfort zones. We assume it's reserved for big businesses with big budgets, but Alex works with small to medium-sized businesses in her new venture coming from a large agency, and she outlines ways that small businesses can use market research in their business economically, either doing it in-house themselves or using external expertise, or mixing the two together. So there are definitely ways that market research can be used as part of your strategy for understanding what your customers want and ensuring that you're delivering those things to them. So sit back, enjoy my interview with Alex, and please, any questions, don't hesitate to contact us and we'll get back to you with the answers. Thank you so much for joining me today, Alex. This is an absolute pleasure. I've always valued market research, but I'll be honest, I've never actually employed a professional. So I'm really excited when I saw your business come up on my Instagram. So anyone who thinks Instagram doesn't bring you business, that is how I found Alex.
This just in.
Yep. So you do find your right people that way. So I was really excited because I just thought a lot of small businesses don't get how valuable it can be and how they can do it themselves and how they can use professionals. So,
or even what it is.
Exactly. So let's start by telling me a little bit about your background and how you got into market research and your story.
Absolutely. Well, look, my career actually started in a slightly different area. I started in academia. I did my research and my studying was really in psychology and behaviour change, a lot of government and social research, and my PhD focused on girls with autism. And, you know, I really loved that space and I loved the research side of that. But universities are hard places to work, you know, funding and all those sorts of things. So after a few years, I pivoted to market research and insights because at the end of the day, research is research to an extent. And I'm just super nosy. So I just really, I really wanted to be able to keep doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I made the change into market research, and you know, because I came from a different perspective, people, psychology, behaviour change, and not marketing, I bring quite a different perspective to it.
Yeah.
And it's much more about, for me, why people do things and the motivations behind those things, as opposed to how we can understand it from a marketing perspective. That still comes into it.
But you're right, we marketers can get caught up by the shiny object and the fun stuff and stuff. And so bringing it back to actually the core of the people and why
consumers,
is really important. Definitely. And you worked before, you're now got your own business. So tell us how you went through a journey you went from large
So
market research.
That's right. Nearly 10 years I've spent in large market research or insights consulting agencies in Melbourne. Been at 3 different ones, and then at the start of this year in January 2025, I said to myself, you know what, I'm going to go and do this myself. And you know, there were lots of reasons for that, but particularly the stage of life I am with my kids and all those sorts of things. And so possibly stupidly, a little bit terrifyingly, I went out on my own, and that was 4 months ago, and I haven't looked back yet.
I think every person listening to this who's gone out on their own probably uses exactly the same words that you just used.
Absolutely. So,
okay, so that's great. So you're only 4 months, 5 months now into your own journey, which is amazing. I want to start because I've probably got the definition wrong myself. Tell me what market research is.
So essentially what it comes down to is that it is evidence-based decision making, but really kind of at the core of it, it's speaking to consumers about different things, what they think, feel, do, you know, what annoys them, what frustrates them, what they wish would happen with a specific type of product or service or brand. It's asking consumers their opinions, basically. It's listening to those perspectives, whether that be through an online survey or a focus group or lots of different ways of getting that data. But it's essentially then looking at that data and seeing what those customers are telling us and those consumers are telling us. And from there, we can understand, you know, what a business or a brand can be focusing on, avoiding, pivoting to, improving, all those sorts of things.
Listening, I think, is key, because the one thing that's really important, if you are going to take this message and this conversation and think about market research, you've got to be open to making changes if your customers tell you that's what you need to do.
Exactly. And I think that's such a good point. The reality of market research is that if you are going to ask people, and I think this is true in life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Don't ask a stupid question if you're not prepared to hear a stupid answer potentially. But at the end of the day, I've worked with some of the biggest brands in Australia, and sometimes you know that you're doing this work and it's a tick box exercise, and once you've given it to them, it will go on a shelf so they can say they've done it. But the brands and the marketing leaders and executives who genuinely say, we may not like the answer and that's just the way it is, and then say we will be prepared to work with that, they're the ones who actually get the most benefit out of market research. And as you say, it's about listening, it's about also asking the right questions in the right way to make sure that you're also not just presupposing an answer that you really want and predisposing people to giving you a specific answer.
And that's something, I know my son was in a store where they, it's a small survey. What was your level of satisfaction? And you get a $5 voucher for filling it in. Now, you're not going to get the answers that are true, in my opinion, from that. You're going to get people who are all going to tick the box, as you said, as consumers. You've got to make sure that your mechanism will give you the honest answers rather than pat you on the back and give you a bit of a hero worship.
That's right. And I think in the same vein as that, only speaking to your actual customers who have bought from you and who already kind of believe in your product or brand or service enough to buy from you isn't actually enough either. There's kind of a difference between the people who have bought from a specific brand versus the wider market that are interested in the products and services that you offer in general. So just going to a single hairdresser is not the same as looking at everyone who uses curly hair hairdressers or something.
And I think that's the one area that I know I ask my customers questions regularly when I had the store, but that's where if I had found a professional to help me to look at wider, I think there is so much value in that because I personally feel that the professional does that going out to other people better than you can possibly do yourself. In fact, I can't even begin to imagine how I would do that myself if I was still in retail.
No, of course. And it's why you've got, everything in life needs that element of independent. You have independent lawyers or juries who make decisions for people. If you ask someone a loaded question and they're worried about giving you the answer, it's going to potentially skew the response you're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on your website, you state, I'm going to read this, at its core, market research is about mitigating risks, which I think is a great statement. Can you give us a little bit more information about what you mean there?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about businesses and the decisions that they need to make, and if we talk specifically about kind of slightly smaller or medium businesses rather than your really big corporate, those small businesses are no different to big businesses in that they still have to be making strategic decisions. They need to be deciding where they're going to invest their time and money and energy. And that has an element of risk to it. At the end of the day, no one, as far as we know, has a crystal ball that genuinely works. And that can be really scary. It can be really daunting. At the core of market research is really about supporting decisions with data, with evidence that says we can be as sure as is reasonable that this is where you should be focusing, or that this is what's frustrating people, so invest in changing that. Or this messaging is likely to connect with people. It kind of gives you confidence in making decisions and says, we know we're not going to be making a completely terrible decision. Now, obviously, then there's the execution and all those sorts of things, and that is separate. Even Coke Life. Do you remember the green Coke that came out about 15 years ago? It was a weird version of in these green bottles, and it didn't have all the same sugars. And it was based on a real consumer insight that people were drinking less sugary soft drinks and that they wanted healthier options. The execution was terrible and it didn't last. But market research really gives you that confidence to say, right, we know that this is a real experience that people are having, or perspective, or annoyance, or whatever it is. And that is giving people that confidence. One of the examples I often use is if you've got a local physio clinic, for example, and they're saying, we really think that a lot of our clients would want a reformer Pilates class. But they look around and they go, well, there's 2 KX Pilates down the road and there's another little boutique one over there. There's no point. There's all the options. But maybe if they went and did some market research,
Yeah.
not just to their own clients, but to the broader community, what they may find is actually a lot of the people who would be inclined to use a reformer Pilates class don't want a 19-year-old in
Yes.
amazing lycra
Yes.
teaching the class.
No.
And that, I mean, they are amazing,
Yes.
but you know, there
Yeah.
are people who would say that isn't for me.
Yeah.
Or perhaps I've had a knee reconstruction and I need someone to make sure that what I'm doing is actually going to be really helpful and gentle, etc., etc. And they want a healthcare rebate from a physio.
Yeah.
And so doing that work and looking at those insights can say to them, right, spending the, say, $50,000 on the reformer machines themselves, that's a huge investment.
Yeah.
But we can be a bit more confident that it is a good idea.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yeah. And it also creates niches. So with what you were saying there, if you find out that actually there is a group of women in their 50s and 60s who really want to exercise but are terrified of feeling like they're embarrassing themselves and they can find a safe space for that, then you've suddenly created a niche for yourself.
Exactly.
That could be just some of your classes and whatever. And taking it a step further, you know, you go and then have these reformer classes, let's say we've introduced them, then find out when and how often you have to run them and what suits people.
Absolutely.
And
the pricing and
because the resources or the resource itself that is the most valuable, I think, to small business is time.
Absolutely.
And so not expending too much time and doing it at the right time and, you know, opening when you need to and when you don't. I spoke to Rosie, a woman who has Malalua shop in Auburn Road. She only opens her store Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I think it's only the 3 days. It could be Wednesday. But and it's 10 till 3. But she works that and she's found that works for her clients and she's found a way to service them outside of those hours as well. But talking and finding out the answers and working out whether that is what your clients want.
Who would have thought?
and potential clients as well. So both sides of the
As you're saying, it gives you that idea of where a niche is, which inherently then often can become a differentiation point.
Yeah.
It can give you insight on your positioning, on your messaging, not just we're really good at this, but talking to pain points, talking to frustrations, talking to needs, barriers in your marketing.
Yeah.
So market research can also make your marketing strategy more efficient and more effective. Now, I am not a marketer.
Yeah.
And that's both in training and in reality.
Yeah.
What I do feeds into marketing.
Yeah.
But if you have insights, real consumer insights, that then a marketer can use to develop your marketing strategy, it's much more likely to be successful and efficient and more cost effective than just hoping that this will be the right approach.
And I think that's one of the things that we do, again, going back to that shiny object, we get excited about what we can do and why, you know, we think that there's something there and
marketers believing their own hype is one of the biggest challenges I have in my, with the greatest of respect.
No, but it's totally true. And we do get caught up and, you know, you can talk to people and they're talking about starting a business and you think, oh, is there a market there? You know, what are you doing? And it's really valuable to find those ways. And so talking to finding those ways, I think it's really important because money is tight for small business. We all know it. We're both small business owners ourselves. And I certainly know that I'm, you know, cutting back a lot of subscriptions and making sure I'm being as tight as I can with money like everyone else. So when you talk about something like this, it can be a bit terrifying because you think big agency. And so, as I said, there are people, Alex is in Australia, but you could work anywhere. But, you know, there are people like Alex who can help small business, are designed to help small business. Tell us how you can work both yourself, so what small business could maybe do themselves versus where there's a real value in having someone that maybe is external to help them along.
Absolutely. And look, the annoying answer to that is how long is a piece of string to an extent, because the breadth of what market research can do is huge.
Yeah.
You know, you can do anything from validating an idea for a product or a service or a business before you spend the time and money and energy on it, which I highly recommend you do. And all the way through to, you know, projects like things called segmentations and choice models, which are really complex but very powerful. When you're talking specifically about small businesses, you know, there are so many tools that have been developed in the last few years, and a lot of them do use AI.
Yeah.
And while the jury isn't out, but we're all navigating this in the market research and insights world, very carefully. As I say, there are lots of tools out there that can facilitate this for you. You know, using things like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms or Typeform, you can create these and disseminate them to your customers, your clients. Use things like social media ads to target other people in your market or your category. But essentially what it's about is thinking first about, what do I actually need to understand and know? Not the actual specific questions in a survey or a focus group, but what is the business decision I need to make, or what is the unknown that I need to have a clarity on? And that is so important. And again, you work with really big corporate companies, and the number of times we get a brief and we talk to these clients of ours, a comment was made by the CEO to the CFO, who then had a meeting with the director of marketing, who then briefed in the insights manager, who then spoke to us. Pardon this horrific phrase, but the Chinese whispers that goes all the way down there, what you end up with often bears very little resemblance to the original comments. And that happens in like the biggest businesses in Australia, brands that everyone knows. If it can happen there, you also need to be making sure you're really thinking about what your actual business question is. Then it's about deciding the best approach, and that might be a survey, that might be a focus group, it might be mystery shopping, for example. You know, there are lots of different ways that this can be executed. And again, when you're doing that, it's about thinking about how you're asking questions so that, again, you're not leading people down a garden path just to give you the answers you want. You know, there's a lot of nuance to how you ask questions properly as well, which I can get into. But then the third part of that is, once you have that data, how you approach it, how you look at it in a way that is going to give you high quality insights and meaningful insights that you can then make decisions from and create the strategy from there.
Speaking to an expert, it's always a bit intimidating. So I did it myself on SurveyMonkey. We asked very big surveys, and our customers, being Christmas, they were enthusiasts, so they would complete this very big survey. But because we were seasonal, we had basically planning sort of for 6 months of the year. So I would always do it at the beginning of the year to help me. But the kind of things I'd be asking is, when should we be open? What did they like as far as training? You know, which bits worked, which didn't, what they'd like to see. Obviously products, and then socials. You know, where are they? And so it helped me understand in my planning what I can be doing.
Absolutely.
And then, as I said, I would love to have gone, okay, well, who's the other bit that I'm missing here, which was the bit I didn't do, but you know, I think is a great opportunity as well. One of the things, going back to money again, which again, it's so tight at the moment that we've got to consider it. If someone is thinking about market research and knows there's value in it for their business, whether it's for a new product or for something existing in their running business, working with professionals like yourself, are there ways of going about it so that they can do some themselves, or, you know, like whether it's yourself or someone else, how could they engage someone to do that?
One of the benefits of being a freelancing consultant in this space is that I often say we can do things faster and more cost effectively because we don't have all the overheads that a lot of big agencies have. But one of the things that I offer is, you know, if someone wants to just have a really, really good questionnaire that then becomes a survey, I can develop that questionnaire for them properly after determining what the actual needs are and what you're trying to achieve. Just writing those questions, quote unquote, properly may be all that someone actually needs. And then they can go and use SurveyMonkey or Typeform or whatever they want to make it into a survey and then disseminate it. On the other hand, someone may have already written a survey or a questionnaire and they want that reviewed and then for it to be professionally created. Other ways that you could engage someone is, you know, maybe you've got some data but you just don't know what to do with it and you don't know how to make sense of it. And so using someone like me for a couple of hours of my time to just have the discussion, or to have someone say, actually, this is what this data is telling you. And then it's the so what next? And that is, I suppose, the bit where having a professional consultant comes into play. It's at the end of the day, anyone can write a questionnaire or a survey. And there are things like SurveyMonkey and a fabulous platform called GlowFeed, GLOW. And, you know, they have built into them examples of questions and how to ask them and things like that. Now, obviously, depending on your category and your product and your industry and all those sorts of things, there is nuance to how you would approach these things, but they are a fabulous starting point. and they will give you guidance as to how to sort of approach these things.
Yep.
But the reality is that there is a difference between someone just writing a survey and putting it out there, and then someone being able to, as I say, understand what to do with it. The so what and the what next is kind of what differentiates, you know,
and the business
wheat
owner
from the chaff.
can have that blinkered.
Yeah,
You see the results that you want to
absolutely.
see because you're wanting to, it's a pet project, and
Yeah.
so it looks like it's okay.
Yeah.
But then if someone else will go, actually, what's going on here?
Exactly. And, you know, one of the things I often say to people is, for startups in particular,
Yeah.
but all small businesses, you've had a brainwave at 3 a.m. You think, oh my goodness, I've come up with the most extraordinary product in the history of the world. And you mention it to your next door neighbour's cousin's clairvoyant, and they think it's extraordinary as well. And you go, great. There's a really big difference between you thinking it's a great product and the people in the market who would potentially buy that product agreeing, and not just that they would think it's a good product, but they also have intention to actually spend money on it.
Okay, so that's a great lead into what was going to be my next question for you. So I've just created this idea in my brain of what I want to do. With your experience, knowing what you do, again, small business, tight budgets, what would you suggest if someone has an idea for a new business or a new product or a new part of their business?
Yeah.
What would be the minimum that you think that you should be doing from a market research perspective before investing anything else?
So the first thing I would say is products that are developed from a consumer pain point or need or tension is already automatically going to be more successful, depending on the execution and all those other things, than a product that is simply created because it seems cool.
Yeah.
Products that are developed that then go look for a problem to solve don't end up being successful.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, if you have to convince people that it's a good idea, because it's never occurred to them that it might be something that they would need, it needs to resonate with people easily and quickly and on a level where they actually see that it's going to solve a problem for them.
That's right.
If you just create, I don't know, did you ever hear of the Evian water bra?
No.
Yeah.
Please
It was
tell
a
me
real
more.
thing. It was a real thing, this idea of like, in summer, women get really hot. And it was, you know, the idea was to keep you cool. And I am not making this up. It had a pouch for a water bottle in, like an Evian water bottle as well, apparently. I don't understand how that works. I can't see that this was developed
I'm looking
by a
this
woman.
up and finding a photo of this after the chat.
I just look at that and I kind of go, that is a product in search of a problem to solve. I'm not sure how many of us really are looking for more space to hide their water bottle in their bra, but I mean, maybe 20 years ago going to a concert, but you know, my point is that when you're starting out, spending the time and the energy to really say, is this something that has legs? Does this idea have legs? Before you invest, as you were saying, the time and the money and the energy and the tears and the blood into this, it can give you a sense of whether or not, you know, it's even worth investing in it, or if actually your idea was good, but it just needs tweaking, or it needs just a little bit of nuance, or actually if you do this, this will be much more relevant. So starting out in that space, and you can do that. I mean, again, how long is a piece of string? You can spend $150,000 on that, or you can spend a few $100s on it. You know, the reality is that any insight you get is going to be more valuable than no insights.
Yes. And you can get to people who aren't, you know, like whether you aren't your current customers as well. And I think that's the thing that certainly, as I said, I've always found a sort of, oh God, that's too hard.
That's right. And look, you know, there are certainly some groups of people that are harder to access than others. There exists an industry called research panels. Any of your listeners who may have ever done an online survey or gone to a focus group, they may be on a research panel, and so some of them are like Pure Profile or Octopus, and essentially what that is that everyday people sign up to these panels and they give them some information about themselves, their demographics, where they work, their age, do you have kids, all these sorts of things. And then someone like me has a client that comes along and says, oh, we need to speak to people who have bought yogurt in the last 12 months. And so I can go to a research panel and say, I need to speak to 1,000 people who have purchased yogurt for themselves or someone in their household in the last 12 months. And they'll say, great, we can feasibly do that, and that's fine. And they will charge us for every person that completes the survey.
Okay.
That's a really easy group to go to. You know, yoga buyers, it's all most of us do to an extent by that. The reality is though, if you are looking for a really niche market, it can start getting trickier and more expensive. Not impossible, just more expensive. If you're looking for people who wear purple underwear on Tuesdays, you know, that is very tricky. But the reality is that you can always get to the people that you need to get to.
Yeah.
As a freelancer, one of the things that I need to do often is be creative in how we do that. And that's where things like targeted Instagram or TikTok or Facebook ads come into it, or LinkedIn, or, you know, all of those sorts of things helps us get to the other people.
Yeah.
And then I suppose this is an important point to mention as well, that when you are asking for people to spend 10, 15 minutes giving you their thoughts and their insights, the majority of people aren't going to do that out of the goodness of their heart.
Yeah.
There are psychopaths out there like me who just love research and will do a survey for absolutely nothing in return because I'm really sadistic like that. But the majority of people just aren't, you know. So you need to think about how you're going to incentivize people to take part in that. Now, a really important thing to remember, and I'm going to make a really big point about this, every state in Australia has different rules and guidelines and laws and legislation about how you can do that. Whether it's, say, a game of chance or a game of skill, it can require permits sometimes. Right. There are ways around that, saying things like going in the draw for a chance to win, for example. There are certain languages and words that you need to use in order to make sure you're being compliant.
Yeah, I had no idea. That's interesting.
Outside of that, and it is worth getting advice on that.
Yeah.
And looking up, you know, on the various government websites.
And it'll be the same overseas too. So
and there'll be different rules over there. Exactly right. The point of incentivizing people is to say, look, if you're going to help me out, I'm going to help you out. And that might be, let's say I wanted to do it, I might offer $1,000 worth of consulting hours to one person, and then for 5 people, they might be offered free access to my digital guide. So what next? Sort of, you know, which helps people understand how to get into market research for themselves, not into the industry, but doing it for themselves. But, you know, you may need to offer people something. Yeah. You need to make it worth their while and worth their time. It might be a $5 voucher, as your son said, you know, often needs to be something. Yeah. And, you know, that is valuing the people that you're talking to is really important. So,
have you found the perfect time frame of a survey, just out of interest? Like,
in terms of
people are happy to say, if you said to someone, like, you know, I've got a 3-minute survey, and they'll go, yeah, sure, no problem. And genuinely, this is a 10-minute survey, and they're going to go, no, I'm not doing it.
Oh my goodness. That is probably the hardest part. One of the hardest parts of what I do is estimating how long a questionnaire or survey will actually take people to complete. And, you know, there's huge variation in that for different reasons. But my advice would be to keep it as tight as possible and to keep it as specific as possible in terms of what you're asking. Yeah. Because the more fluff you have in there, the more annoyed people will get.
Yes.
So the first thing I would say is never say it's going to take 5 minutes if it actually is going to take 20.
I totally agree with you.
You know,
you're shooting yourself.
It's disrespectful. You're shooting yourself in the foot, and you will end up with bad quality data.
Yeah.
I would say 10 minutes is, generally speaking, kind of a really good number to be going for. There are some types of methodologies and research, for example, segmentations, which do need a much more in-depth survey. You need a lot of data in order to actually properly do that analysis. And similarly with things like a choice model or some pricing studies to work out how to price certain products and services. What I would say is about 10 minutes, you can do a lot in that time. As a rule of thumb, we generally say that respondents can answer 3 questions a minute. Now, if those 3 questions are age, gender, and location, they can do those in 30 seconds normally. Similarly, if you have what we call an open-end question, where you say, in a few sentences, what did you like about the product description that I just showed you? We normally take about a 30-second time stamp for that. So, you know, you need to kind of be sensible with how you're estimating those sorts of things. But generally speaking, about 3 questions a minute is what we say people can do when they're answering a survey.
And if you're doing it yourself, and there's something I didn't do, but thinking about it now, it would be great to give it to someone you trust, not just a family member or someone who's going to go, yeah, it's fine. Get them to time it.
Absolutely.
And also to tell you if there's any questions that made no sense or seem to be self-indulgent or anything else that is annoying them as they're doing it.
So that is something I do for every single survey I've ever developed. my husband, unfortunately, I can't use him anymore because he has become too good at knowing what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to ask. And he is brutally honest with me, which is really important.
Yeah.
But it is really important to get people to, it's what we call cog testing or cognitive testing, to make sure that someone else who has no context, they don't know what the reason for the survey is necessarily. They just go in and answer the questions as they're presented to them. And getting people to say, this just didn't make sense, that was too wordy. And making sure that it works on a mobile as well, because most people do these surveys on their mobile phone.
So right.
Is it easy to do on the phone? And as you say, testing how long it takes them, that's hugely, hugely important as well.
You mentioned way back in our conversation mystery shopping, which I really love as an idea. But I'd love to know, do you think there's value? Because again, I'm coming back at the moment really about the costs and things. Using friends, family, others, can you still make that visit and the data that you get back from that worthwhile for the owner, or is it obviously the staff won't know who they are still?
I was a mystery shopper when I was at uni. I remember 8 million years ago I signed up for something. I don't even remember how I got into it, and I used to go be paid to go to restaurants and lots of different things. Look, I think you hit the nail on the head. As long as the person who is in the shop isn't able to quickly and easily identify that person is a mystery shopper, then yes. What is really important though is whomever is going to go and do that mystery shopping, and just as an aside, that doesn't just have to be in a retail shop. I remember once I did it for like storage place. Right. Like I had to go and check out the different storage unit options and things. So it can be anything, any category or industry. It's about making sure that the person who's going to go and do it really understands what they are looking for, what the questions are you want them to ask, or at least get information about. You need them to make sure that they're going to go and do it. It has to be worth your while. Because again, if you're paying them or if you're giving them a voucher for something, you need to get value out of that. Otherwise, you're just going to be throwing your money away. And then having a follow-up survey or something for that person to fill in is really important as well.
The one thing I think is really important with Mystery Shop, because staff members can think it's there purely to spy, to find what they're doing badly. No. You can sell it and keep it positive with your staff and talk about the fact that we found that there wasn't enough training in this, or we need to do that, or, there's ways of engaging the staff so that they don't think it's purely a negative thing.
At the end of the day, it's about helping the business, and that includes helping the staff so that they are able to do their job more easily and more effectively. A mystery shopper may discover that these poor staff members have a POS system that is just so cumbersome and over the top that it takes them such a long time to process a sale, and then the line becomes so long. Or that it is one person in a shop that is always busy and it's unfair. Another way that it can be really valuable, and again, making your staff, their lives easier, is the mystery shopper can go and say, the layout of this store is excruciating to navigate. And that's not the staff's, generally not the staff's fault. That's on the business owner to get right. So all of these things, I think the way you frame it to your staff is, and I'd be careful telling them beforehand as well, because as you say, that can kind of bias their behaviours and things at the end of the day. The way you frame it is that it's about you as the business owner doing right by them, doing right by your customers, and making sure that you're giving everyone the best experience possible. And if there was an issue with the staff, that you would deal with that properly. And this isn't about catching them out. It's about making sure that their job is easier. Totally agree with you. And the other thought, as we've been talking, thinking about, again, how you get local data and so forth, I'd like to know, I'm assuming that you can't just walk outside of your store and survey people going past. You need a permit or something. Why not? Oh, you can? Yeah. There's no, okay, that's really good. Absolutely. All right. Yeah, I mean, look, you have to sort of ask yourself what the ROI on that is going to be. If someone is in the street, I don't know about you, but I tend to immediately get on a very important phone call. We avoid eye contact. The reality is that the number of people who stop for those sorts of things is low, to be honest with you. And look, we still do it. There are a lot of agencies out there and organisations that offer what we call, field
staff.
Field staff.
Yeah.
I can't think of the word right now, but
Yeah.
where you're out in the field and asking people those sorts of questions, and that's also called ethnography, which is really good. Watching people do as they buy yogurt, for example. That's in situ data. Watching people in their natural environment doing those things, and that could be in someone's house or that could be at the supermarket or whatever. That is really important, but you do need to let people know, if you are asking them questions, what it's for. You need to ask them if you have their permission to record their answers, whether that's on a survey or, with a voice recorder. They need to give you their permission for that. That's really important, because if you're collecting data, you have a responsibility to be using that appropriately, to make sure that there's no personally identifiable information in there. Data security is a very hot topic everywhere at the moment, and particularly in what I do. Every year we all have to refresh the training around data security and things like that. So you do need to ask permission of the individuals you're speaking to. And I suppose the only thing I would say is, with getting permits, it would depend where you were. So you probably couldn't just go to the Melbourne Zoo and do it. Like, you'd need
a private space. You can't, but a street space, you could.
Most likely,
So you can't go into Chadstone if your store's in Chadstone and do it. You probably have to have a permit.
I mean, again, I think it's probably, I've done, ethnography in shops in Chadstone where the brand has said, yes, that's what we're going to go and do, and that's fine. But if you're just talking about a hallway in Chatty, then again, you'd probably need to make sure that no one's going to be upset about that.
Okay. You also just made a point there, which I think is really great. We never, as business owners, we're always so busy that we don't sit back and watch even how people navigate our store. Where if we're in a space where they're going past a window and a window's important, are they being stopped by our window? Are they engaging with what we're doing there? And I know it's not a survey, but it sort of just made me realise that we don't think about sitting back and looking, and that's another form of data.
That is market research. That's what we would call UX, so user experience research. And that might be on your website or a platform. If you say you run, online communities or training, how do people use that? What are they frustrated by? Can they not work out how to navigate to X or Y? When it's a physical store or a product, watching how people use that. We talk about, there are unboxing videos all over the internet now, but ultimately that is hugely valuable. One of my favourite types of market research methodologies that I haven't done for a long time actually, but it's called a moment of truth.
Right.
And what you can do is you can get, say, half a dozen potential consumers who are non-rejectors of your category and send out to them some of your product, or say a new product that you're trialing. You send them instructions, very explicit instructions, and you say, before you open the packet, film yourself answering these couple of questions about what you're expecting or this or that. And then film yourself when you first open the lid of this new drink. Give it a smell. What do you smell? And you're asking them to film themselves doing these things, their taste, and you're literally getting them to sort of, in that moment of truth, the first moment they're experiencing it, what is their honest feedback, their reactions, their thoughts. Oh my goodness, the rich data that can come out of that is huge. And from there you can sort of go, oh, everyone loved it, but they all found that lid really hard to open. Or they couldn't find on the label where it said how much sugar is in it, or whatever. Those little things. Sometimes as well, I think, as market researchers, we can certainly be guilty of this, but marketers can often forget that it is the most often seemingly simple things that actually make the world of difference. Oftentimes, that is one of my favourite type of insights to give to people. Is to be like, you don't need to worry about completely redoing or overhauling X, Y, and Z.
Absolutely.
I'm working with someone at the moment. They were trying to understand why some healthcare professionals weren't referring patients on to a specific support program that this organisation runs. And they were convinced that there was a problem with the program, that the healthcare professionals didn't have faith in it, that it wasn't developed properly. We're still in field, and I'm 99% sure this is it. No one knows about it. They're not referring because they do not know about it. They have no awareness of it. That's a pretty good problem to have at this point. That is much easier to solve than needing to fix a problem within the actual service.
You've just made me think of Utopia TV show in Australia. I don't know if you've watched it, but they had an example of no one signing up to a solar program. And it's like, what's wrong? And then when you look, and they went through the testing of how you did it, It was absolutely mind-blowingly difficult
They
to
did
sign
not
up
do
to
any user experience
and so-
testing on that website, did they?
and I'm constantly, I know, and I am just as guilty as anyone else of being drawn to the exciting marketing events and planning and so forth. And making sure your website works well is like, oh, it's so annoying and boring.
Yeah, but not just works well, but is easy to understand, like in language that consumers use.
Totally.
As well. Yeah.
It's the simplest things.
Absolutely.
And that's what we can think, that we need to plan something new and then find actually know what we need to do is tell people.
And on that, I think it's really important as well. As a society, we're becoming much more aware of and have a much better understanding than we've ever had, and acceptance of different neuroprofiles, as in people with autism and ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, but then also physical differences and different abilities in terms of access needs. If you are only speaking to the same type of person as well, or if you're only testing your products or your website on people who don't have any vision challenges, or any of these sorts of things, again, you are unfairly ignoring a substantial portion of the population who have different needs. I don't know about you, but I love brands who are accessible, not just from a physical perspective, but also cognitively accessible, and who are genuinely thinking about those things. And I think it's becoming more and more a hygiene factor for every business and product and brand.
Yeah, there's a couple that come straight to mind. Woolworths, when I was in there, they had, I think, between 11 and 12, whatever the time was, quiet hour, so that, you know, it helps people. And when I did do a podcast episode on neurodiverse, and I know I'm trying to remember if it was 10 or 20%. It was a huge percentage of people.
It's 1 in 5, so it's 20% of the population. Yeah.
And I know that I was totally unaware of that level, and, you know, being able to make small adjustments that can help when you start to think about that.
And look, this is actually a really nice segue. So a couple of years ago, I did some work with an amazing woman called Natalie Mason-Phillips, and she founded an organisation called Inclusive Change, and she is essentially a change manager or a change consultant, but works very specifically with organisations these days to understand how to support better neurodivergent and neurodiverse employees. We did a study looking at neurodiversity in retail settings. You know, we went out and we asked neurodivergent people and or their carers or parents about what their experiences are, what they find challenging, what helps, what they want, all those sorts of things. We included a population as well of people who are typically developing or don't have a neurodivergent neuro profile.
Yeah.
All of the things that neurodivergent people told us they wanted and needed, neurotypical people also said, that sounds great. So I love being able to go to the shops and hear myself think.
Yeah.
You know, if the music is so loud, or being able to easily navigate through a shop so I don't feel like I have to go sideways in order to... All of these things benefit everyone.
Yeah.
Your neurotypical customers will appreciate those things just as a neurodivergent customer.
Yeah. God, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So Natalie developed a whole bunch of assets as a result of that.
And we'll put that on the podcast notes too, because that's definitely something people might want to look into. For people who haven't thought about it before, it's a really important thing to consider.
And stop guessing what you think people want and need. Ask them. Just ask them.
Yeah, absolutely. You briefly mentioned something about a digital guide earlier. Can you tell me what that is about, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I jumped into freelancing for myself, one of the things I really wanted to do is focus a lot on these smaller and medium businesses, because I really think that so often, not only do they not know what market research is, or why they should care, but helping them understand that actually it is something that they should be doing. It's not just Bunnings and Woolies and Coles, and that they can do it. They don't have to have a $50,000 budget to do it, was something that really excited me.
Yeah.
But as you say, you know, and I experience this as well as you know, the budgets are so tight. And the reality is that for most small businesses at first, it's going to have to be a self-serve DIY option. But quality in is quality out. Rubbish in, rubbish out. There are some fairly standard principles or fundamentals or guidelines that when you kind of keep them in mind and you apply them, it is going to give you better data and therefore better insights. And so my thinking was, why gatekeep this at the end of the day? That's just unhelpful. But I can actually put this together into a guide that people can get access to, that gives them a sense of, okay, if you're writing a survey question, make sure the survey responses that someone can answer that they are mutually exclusive and completely exhaustive. What does that mean? It means that all of the possible options that someone could want to answer are there within reason.
Yeah.
And that, they don't overlap with each other.
Yeah.
There's lots of different little things that when you are keeping those in your mind, make the data that you get better quality and more meaningful. So I'm pulling this together. It's going to give people an understanding of what market research is, what it can do, different methodologies, as I say, those different kind of guidelines as to how to actually write a question properly. And then once you've got some data, what to think about and how to approach it and how to get the insights out of it. But then also when to really consider using a professional.
Yeah.
And that may be for the whole thing, it may be for little bits and pieces.
Yeah.
I'm pulling that together to try and give smaller businesses and medium businesses a better chance of being able to do it properly.
I think that's
as properly as possible.
Brilliant idea. I think that basically, as you say, letting people know what it's about and how they can use it and opening their eyes to it. And it is, with the many hats that we all wear, market research is another hat that people go, oh my God, I don't want to. But it is so valuable before you get caught up with everything else. So I'm going to be sharing this in the show notes, of course, but and littleduckinsights.com.au. So register, you can sign up on your website.
I'll make sure that is something that
I think you had an email down the bottom.
There's a contact page.
So if you just sign up to that, and then Alex can, when it's done, let you know about it. Would be great. All right, I think we've covered a lot today, and I love, as I said, the idea that it is available for small business. It is not a tool that is just for the big guys. And it is a tool that we should be considering and one of those starting points, and also one of those check-ins to see how we're going, and that we don't get closed off by our own opinions of what we're doing well and what our customers want when we're not asking them about it. As I said, show notes, Little Duck Insights. Thank you so much, Alex. This has been an absolute pleasure. Alex and I, I'm sure we're going to be crossing paths and working a bit on, we've both got kind of a bit excited about this small business and the opportunities here. Thank you everyone for listening to the podcast or watching. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. Any questions you want to contact me. If you haven't got the show notes, then you can send it through and I'll get it through to Alex as well. Thank you again. To everyone else, we will see you soon. Take care. Bye.